Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gandhi. Let's get started. Our top story tonight is on the mounting tensions between the US and Iran, with both sides digging in their heels and warning of dire consequences. Is a US-Iran war imminent? We are decoding all of this for you in just a bit. Also on the show for you tonight, Donald Trump claims a breakthrough in the Russia-Ukraine war, claiming that Putin has agreed to a week-long pause in the aerial bombardment. We are telling you more on what things are actually looking like on the ground. Also, getting you the latest on Trump's latest remarks on Canada. Is America seeking to tear Canada apart? We tell you why that question is being asked. All this and more coming up. Is an Iran-US war imminent? Will things get worse than last year? We're asking those questions because both America and Iran, as of now, are saber-rattling, digging in their heels on their demands and also warning of dire consequences. With jets, warships and missile threats. Let's start off with Iran. Tehran sounding the alarm. Its military leadership, in fact, is issuing some of its strongest warnings yet, saying any American strike would trigger a full-scale response on land, at sea, and in the air. Iran is saying any American attack would trigger a regional war. Senior Iranian military officials saying US bases across West Asia would be within the range of Iranian missiles and drones. Iran army spokesperson, in fact, has said Iran has ordered its forces to respond instantly to any strike. He says delays are no longer acceptable, warning that any conflict would not end quickly and would engulf large parts of West Asia, including Israel and countries hosting US forces. Now, these warnings are also coming as America continues to expand its military presence across the region. In Israel, a US Navy-guided missile destroyer has anchored in Israel, Israel's city located on the Red Sea coast. And the ship adds surface-to-air defense capability to Israel's missile shield. As per analysts, it is designed to help intercept any potential Iranian retaliation if Washington authorizes strikes. Now, Israeli officials are saying during last year's 12-day war, their missile defense systems intercepted about 86% of the incoming ballistic missiles. But then questions still remain about interceptor stockpiles after heavy use. On America's side, its naval presence, including land-based power systems and additional naval assets, intended to strengthen the regional air defense. At the same time, the head of Israeli military intelligence has visited Washington to deepen military coordination in the event of a war. Beyond the naval deployments, in fact, the US is also preparing for more covert options. An aircraft flew from Britain to Azerbaijan reportedly. The aircraft is designed for special forces infiltration and extraction missions. And officials are saying one option under consideration, reportedly, is a commando operation targeting remaining elements of Iran's nuclear program. President Trump, for that matter, has been cautious about deploying ground forces after past failures, including the 1980 hostage rescue mission. Another option being reportedly discussed is targeted strikes against Iran's senior leadership, including the supreme leader. Meanwhile, Iran is rejecting any pressure on its military capabilities. The country's foreign minister has said Iran's missile and defense programs are not negotiable. He says Tehran is open to talks only if the negotiations are fair and conducted on equal footing. He confirms no meeting is currently planned with the US officials and says preparatory work is required before any dialogue can resume. Iran's president, meanwhile, has also said nuclear talks will not begin until Washington drops what he calls belligerent threats. At the same time, Iran's judiciary chief also has warned European countries will face consequences after the EU designated the Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization. Iranian officials are saying they may respond by blacklisting the European armed forces. Senior Revolutionary Guard commanders now claim Iran's military is stronger than it was during last year's conflict. And they are saying readiness levels have improved and that Iran tends to emerge more powerful after wars. Diplomatic efforts are continuing meanwhile behind the scenes. Turkey is attempting to mediate reportedly between Tehran and Washington. The country's foreign minister saying restarting nuclear talks is vital to prevent escalation. And he has urged the United States to resist pressure for military action. And in Israel, public messaging has also remained restrained. Officials have avoided openly calling for war, but analysts are saying there are concerns about the sustainability of Israel's missile defenses in a prolonged conflict. Now, for President Trump, the decision ahead carries major risks. Recent military operations in Venezuela and earlier strikes on Iran have reinforced his belief in swift, decisive action. But then experts are warning a conflict with Iran would be far larger and harder to contain. And it could also trigger widespread retaliation across multiple countries and draw in regional allies. With Iranian forces on alert, US and Israeli defenses reinforced, diplomacy somewhat fragile, and military options also expanding. The standoff as of now is entering one of its most dangerous phases in years. And the next moves from both sides could determine whether this crisis turns into conflict or returns to the talking table. And switching gears, the Russia-Ukraine war, in fact, has reached a chilling stalemate as temperatures plunge well below zero. Now, President Trump has announced a breakthrough, claiming his Russian counterpart has agreed to a week-long pause in the aerial bombardment. But then, will this halt actually change things on the ground? What are they looking like? Let's take a look.
The guns never truly fell silent. For 4 years, Russia's war against Ukraine has been a merciless grind. Cities shattered by drones, missiles and glide bombs, power grids smashed, millions plunged into darkness and cold. Now there is an unexpected twist. US President Donald Trump says he personally asked Russian President Vladimir Putin to halt strikes on Kyiv and other cities for a week amid extreme cold. Putin, Trump claimed, agreed to the request.
And because of the cold, extreme cold, they have the same that we do, I personally asked President Putin not to fire on Kiev and the cities and towns for a week during this. It's extraordinary. It's not just like cold, it's extraordinary cold, record-setting cold. Over there too, they're having the same. It's a big pile of bad weather, the worst.
In Kyiv, temperatures are plummeting toward minus 30 degrees Celsius, infrastructure crippled, millions across Ukraine are without heating. Russian strikes on energy systems have been devastating, cutting power to homes and hospitals alike. Ukrainians are wary if the pause would last.
I trust neither Putin nor Trump. So I think that even if Putin complies now, he will stockpile missiles and will still keep firing. Putin's goal is the destruction of Ukraine, and all we can do is resist.
This year is the coldest, the most difficult, and the coldest. Our heating in the hall depends on electricity, since we have an electric boiler. That is, if there is electricity, we have heating. No electricity, no heating.
The Kremlin says Putin agreed to halt attacks on the capital until February 1st, and Russia confirmed a pause in bombing of the city, but official Moscow statements have been cautious, with limited detail and no broad ceasefire terms released. Ukraine says it would take corresponding steps if Russia truly refrains from targeting energy infrastructure. Despite the announcement, Ukrainian air defense forces reported continued Russian drone and missile strikes, though mostly along frontline positions rather than deep into city centers. In this harsh winter, a week of quieter skies may offer precious breathing room for civilians and negotiators, but without a comprehensive peace deal, the conflict could erupt again at any moment.
Is the United States seeking to tear Canada apart? Fresh reports indicating that Canadian separatists have been meeting American officials. They are reportedly seeking money from Washington to help fund a breakaway country. And these reports have alarmed Canada, which is already dealing with increasing pressure from US President Donald Trump. A report in the Financial Times says that the leaders of a Canadian separatist group called the Alberta Prosperity Project have been holding meetings with senior US officials. And the separatists have met Trump administration officials as many as 3 times since April last year, reportedly. They plan to meet again in February. The Canadian separatists reportedly want to sit down with the US state and treasury officials next month. Their goal is to try and get a $500 billion credit facility from the US. They want to use this credit line to bankroll Alberta if it decides to secede from Canada. Alberta, Canada's 4th largest province by area, the 4th most populated. It's home to about 5 million people. But what makes it special is that it's Canada's leading oil producer. In fact, the Alberta Prosperity Project wants to hold a referendum, reportedly. They want the people there to vote on whether to remain in Canada or to become a separate sovereign nation. The separatists are currently trying to gather 178,000 signatures in a petition, which would force Alberta to hold the vote. And if they were to secure a funding commitment from the US, it may convince more people there that secession is actually viable. Alberta has had a small separatist movement since the 1930s, in fact. The movement has seen periods of traction and decline through the decades, but it has not held a referendum so far. Only Canada's French-speaking Quebec province has held secession referendums in the past. in 1980 and 1995. Quebec separatists lost both times, but reports say the Albertan separatists have reached out to the leaders of the Quebec referendum to learn from their mistakes. And that is because they believe that the time is ripe to get Alberta to secede from Canada. And the latest boost for Alberta's separatist movement coming after the 2025 general election with the victory of Mark Carney and the Liberal Party. Alberta has been a conservative bastion for years now. And the Liberal Party, extending its 10 years in power, brought renewed calls for Alberta to chart its own course. The separatist group Alberta Prosperity Project reportedly met US officials for the first time in April last year. That's the month of the general election when the Liberal Party returned to power. The separatists plan to meet American officials again in February, reportedly just days after the latest tensions between Trump and the Canadian Prime Minister. Remember, Trump recently threatened Canada with 100% tariffs if it signs a trade agreement with China. And on Thursday, he also threatened a separate 50% tariff on Canadian aircraft. Mark Carney drew Trump's ire during the World Economic Forum in Davos. Remember, Carney made global headlines for his speech at the summit, where he indirectly blamed Trump for the end of the post-World War II global order. And he has been facing regular threats from Trump ever since. We've been telling you about that. And Carney was asked about the Albertan separatists meeting the US officials. This is how he responded to that.
I expect the U.S. administration to respect Canadian sovereignty. I'm always clear in my conversation with President Trump to that effect, and then move on to what we can do together.
I'd like to ask, in those conversations, has he ever raised the prospect of Alberta or Quebec separation?
No.
So far, reports say that the US is not planning to bankroll the Albertan separatists. However, last week, the US Treasury Secretary hinted that he was supporting the referendum initiative. He said, quoting, Albertans are very independent people and that they wanted what the US has, quote unquote. Will this seemingly tacit support actually turn into a real financial commitment is the question, or is this just a way for the Trump administration to play Canadians against each other while it pursues its own agenda? Moving on, Donald Trump is taking his own government to court. Trump, two of his eldest sons and the Trump Organization filed a lawsuit against the IRS and the Treasury Department. He is seeking $10 billion in damages over allegedly leaking confidential tax returns. And the legal action was filed in a federal court in Miami. The complaint claims that government agencies did not take adequate steps to prevent a former internal revenue service contractor from leaking tax returns, reportedly. And according to the court documents, Trump is suing in a personal capacity rather than as a president. The case basically centering on former IRS contractor Charles Littlejohn. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison in 2024 after pleading guilty to leaking Trump's tax records to the New York Times. Trump's tax returns were the focus of speculation during his first term in office, remember. In the year 2020, the New York Times reported that Trump paid just $750 in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017. And Trump dismissed the report as fake and said the information was illegally obtained. Littlejohn also admitted to stealing tax records of thousands of wealthy individuals, including Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, reportedly. Now, the filed lawsuit says that the IRS and US Treasury Department had a duty to safeguard and protect their confidential tax returns. It claims that the leak caused financial harm, public embarrassment, unfairly tarnished their business reputations, portrayed them in a false light and negatively affected public standing of President Trump, his sons, and his organization. This is not the first time that Trump has taken legal action against the federal government he oversees. The New York Times reporting that Trump has sought $230 million in damages from the U.S. Department of Justice. The claim relates to investigations into his handling of classified documents and efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Since returning to office, Trump has filed multiple lawsuits, often against media organizations, demanding billions of dollars. He sued the BBC last year over edits to a January 6 speech clip. He also sued the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch over reporting links to Jeffrey Epstein. Other lawsuits include a $5 billion case against JP Morgan Chase and its CEO. Here's a quick look at what else is lined up for you on the show tonight. In Indonesia, a 21-year-old woman fainted after receiving 140 lashes for having sex outside marriage and drinking alcohol. We get you the complete story. Do you have no control over how long you live, no matter what you do? Is longevity not under your control at all and only linked to your genes? We're telling you more about what the latest findings are. You don't want to miss this. All this and more coming up. Are tech giants accountable for social media addiction? Are they fueling a mental crisis among the youth? A US court trial beginning this week can potentially provide answers to many such questions. As big tech firms are in the dock, let's just tell you more about what's happening. A 19-year-old woman from California filed a lawsuit against the tech giants Meta, TikTok, YouTube. She claimed to have been addicted to these companies' platforms at a young age because of their attention-grabbing design, quote-unquote. The petitioner is reportedly seeking to hold these companies accountable as she has blamed them for fueling her depression and suicidal thoughts. Incidentally, Snap and TikTok have reached an out-of-court settlement with the petitioner. Data privacy experts perceive this as the reluctance of these companies to publicly disclose certain information, and this also puts pressure on Meta and YouTube, which will face trial.
Well, I think it puts a lot of pressure on them because the allegations are the same against all of the tech companies. And so the consequence is that if Meta loses this battle, then there will be lawsuits into the future by other plaintiffs against other tech companies, and they will use this as a precedent.
Now, at present, a federal US law exempts platforms from legal liability for the material that their users post. However, a verdict against the social media companies is likely to change the jurisprudence. Meta, which has 6.7 billion users globally, is likely to argue that its products did not lead to the petitioner's mental health challenges reportedly. And the Meta CEO is himself likely to take the witness stand during the trial. Countries around the world, as of now, are scrambling to tackle digital addiction among the youth. For instance, nearly 40% of global education systems have varying levels of bans and restrictions on the usage of cell phones in schools. And some of the prominent countries to ban cell phone usage, including France, Italy, the Netherlands, Sweden, Brazil, South Korea. Australia went even further by banning those aged below 16 from using major social media platforms, including Facebook and YouTube. India also has acknowledged the severity of the situation. In its economic survey released earlier, the government of India identified digital addiction as a significant concern. It hinted at the possibility of framing policies to mandate age-based access to social media platforms. The government reportedly expressed the view that tech giants should be tasked to enforce age verification, particularly for social media, gambling apps, as well as targeted advertising. On Gravitas Snapshot tonight, we are putting the spotlight on Eileen Gu. Who is she really? A teenage prodigy who flew higher than her rivals, a global celebrity in ski boots, a young woman trapped between two superpowers perhaps, or an athlete whose flips and spins on the show have created news far beyond the sport. She burst onto the global stage as a teenager, winning 2 Olympic gold medals and a silver at the Beijing Winter Games. But more than her achievement, the loudest noise around her was not applause, it was debate, not about her talent, but about her passport. Born and raised in San Francisco, she began her skiing journey representing the United States, and then in 2019, she made a major decision that changed just about everything for her. She chose to compete for China, her mother's homeland. 3 years later, she became the face of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, delivering medals for the host country. Now she once again steps into the spotlight as China's biggest sporting star ahead of the 2026 Winter Olympics in Italy that start next week. And once again, questions surrounding her nationality are in the spotlight. She says the focus over her nationality saddens her. She insists that she skis for the sport and not for politics. And ahead of yet another Olympics, she is in rich form. She just recently created a record in the sport with her 20th career World Cup win.
Skier with 20 World Cup wins. It sounds pretty unbelievable to say. I think what I've come to realize is that it becomes exponentially harder with each win. And so to carry that pressure and to let it drive me instead of letting it crush me has been a journey.
And off the slopes, let's tell you more about her. She studied at Stanford University. She models for luxury brands. She has a large social media following while remaining a billboard icon across Chinese cities. In fact, she was the 4th highest paid woman athlete last year. In China, fans call her the Frog Princess, a nickname that she got for wearing a green helmet. But the admiration also comes with suspicion to some extent. Some question her loyalty. Others scrutinize her choices, her injuries, even her training budgets. But she points to athletes representing countries beyond their birthplace for decades, across various sports. Her aim is to grow the sport and inspire more people. She stands decorated and she stands at the center of a modern Olympic dilemma. But then in the end, she also remains one thing beyond dispute, a talent on the snow, to say the least, with expectations and also controversy all at once. The use of caning, a medieval-era punishment in Indonesia, has sparked outrage as a 21-year-old woman fainted reportedly after receiving 140 lashes for having sex outside marriage and drinking alcohol. She, along with her partner, was struck on their backs by the Sharia police in a public park with many people in attendance. And after the young woman collapsed, she was carried off the stage by female officers to an ambulance reportedly. On this occasion, 4 others, including a Sharia police officer and his female partners, were also flogged after being caught in close proximity in a private place reportedly. The number of lashes imposed is believed to be one of the highest since the implementation of the Sharia law. This region, home to 5.4 million people, is the only province in Indonesia to apply Sharia law. It was granted special autonomy in 2006 following an agreement signed between Indonesia and a separatist group. Sexual relations outside marriage, homosexuality, and consumption of alcohol are punishable by 10 to 150 publicly administered lashes. Last year as well, this region came under the scanner after 2 men were publicly flogged 76 times each at a city park in August. They were arrested in April after the police found the men kissing and hugging inside a bathroom, reportedly. While global human rights organizations and even the European Union have repeatedly denounced the use of corporal punishment, it remains to be seen whether the Indonesian government will step in to outlaw such legal provisions. Why is the US dollar falling, and why is President Trump not worried about it seemingly? That's the question that is being asked right now, because the president has not just played down the concerns over the currency, he has gone a step further, in fact, and said that a weaker dollar is great, according to him. This week, the American currency, by the way, slipped to its lowest level against the euro in more than 4 years, and that has triggered a fresh debate. Is the White House quietly backing a cheaper dollar? If so, what does it mean for the American economy, and what's really happening? And what does this mean for the rest of the world? Let's just break this down for you bit by bit. First, the numbers. Since President Trump took office in January last year, the dollar has fallen by around 12% against major global currencies. That includes the euro, the Japanese yen, and others. Now, the euro has also crossed $1.20 for the first time since 2021, and that means €1 buying more dollars than before, a clear sign also of a weaker US currency. But why is this happening now? One major reason is President Trump's own comments. When asked if the falling dollar worried him, he said, "No, I think it's great," quote unquote. Markets also took that as a signal. It suggested that the White House is not trying to defend the currency. In financial markets, meanwhile, signals from political leaders matter, of course. And when investors sense that a government is comfortable with a weaker currency, they often sell more of it. And that, in turn, pushes the value down further. A third factor is the Federal Reserve, of course, America's central bank. President Trump has often criticized the current Fed chief for not cutting the interest rates fast enough. We have been telling you about this. Now, Powell is expected to be replaced, and investors are worried that the next Fed chair could favor much lower interest rates. And why does that matter, you ask? Because higher interest rates usually strengthen a currency. They attract foreign investors who want better returns. Lower rates pretty much do the opposite. They make a currency less attractive. So fears of future rate cuts are adding more pressure on the dollar. Why would any president then welcome a weaker currency? That remains the question. Because it carries some advantages. For starters, exports. When the dollar is cheaper, American products become cheaper overseas, and that makes American goods more competitive in global markets. It helps manufacturers sell more abroad, just to put this simply. Second, trade deficit. The US imports more than it exports. A weaker dollar basically can help reduce that gap by encouraging exports and discouraging imports. Third, company profits, very crucial. Many US companies earn money overseas when they convert the foreign earnings into dollars. They basically get more money if the dollar is weak, and that boosts profits. All that sounds great for sure, but there is a serious downside here. The biggest risk, of course, is inflation. When the dollar falls, imports become more expensive. That includes oil, electronics, machinery, consumer goods. Those higher costs are passed on to the consumers, the tax-paying citizens of the country. People pay more in the pump, in stores, online. That hurts households already under financial pressure. And then there is another major risk here, that of confidence. The US benefits enormously from global trust in its economy. Foreign investors buy trillions of dollars worth of US bonds. And that keeps the American borrowing costs low and helps fund the government spending as well. If the investors begin to see a falling dollar as a warning sign, they may reduce their investments, and that in turn would push up the interest rates. It would make government borrowing more expensive, and it could also slow down the economic growth. Some economists are warning that this is playing with fire. Officials like the Treasury Secretary still say they support a strong dollar, but Trump's comments suggesting he is comfortable with the slide, it seems. His own economic advisors have argued that the dollar has been overvalued for years. They believe reducing its strength could reshape global trade, but managing a currency is risky to say the least. Once markets believe a government is fine with decline, it can be hard to reverse. For now, markets are watching the developments closely because how far the dollar falls may determine whether this strategy brings growth or creates the next economic problem. There are some statements that are so bizarre, one cannot help but wonder why they were made in the first place. In fact, the word bizarre fails to fully capture the extent of how outlandish this statement is. It was made by a Malaysian minister. He reportedly suggested that work-related stress is a factor that leads people to, quote, become involved in the LGBT community, quote unquote. In fact, he reportedly listed work stress, social influences, and a lack of religious practice as primary contributors to what he termed LGBT-related behavior. Now you understand why we said the statement is beyond bizarre. Misinformation of this kind is dangerous, to say the least, and naturally those words got angry reactions, with netizens slamming the minister for these outrageous remarks. There has been anger, confusion, and just surprise over the bizarre nature of those comments. In fact, LGBTQ rights advocates have also reacted, reportedly saying the government's quote-unquote ridiculous position also points to a more worrying trend of state-sanctioned repression of the community, especially if it starts citing unverified sources that stigmatize sexual minorities. Malaysian law, remember, criminalizes certain consensual same-sex acts under the Federal Penal Code's colonial-era unnatural offences provisions. Muslims can also be prosecuted under parallel Sharia criminal law nationwide for same-sex conduct or gender expression. As of now, the row over those remarks continues, with reactions that have also voiced concern over the kind of impact such statements can have. How long will you live? Many of us believe the answer lies on what we do, what we eat, our gym routine, or maybe our morning walk. But a new global study claims to deliver a rather blunt reality check. It claims that our genes may have already decided most of our lifespan. According to a paper published in Science, genetics plays a far bigger role in determining lifespan than previously believed. Just to put this simply, you can stretch life a little with healthy habits, but you cannot rewrite your genetic ceiling. Researchers, in fact, from Israel and other institutions, Israel's Weizmann Institute of Science and other institutions, analyzed data from 3 major studies of Swedish twins, including twins raised apart, to test whether these findings applied more broadly. They also studied nearly 2,100 siblings of 450 Americans who lived past the age of 100. Their goal was simple: separate deaths caused by accidents or infections from deaths linked directly to aging, and isolate the true role of genes. The conclusion, challenging decades of conventional medical thinking. Aging, they say, is mostly hereditary. If your genetic potential tops out at around 80 years, no amount of clean eating or jogging is likely to push that number to 100. You cannot turn someone into a centenarian unless they inherit the genes for longevity. And the researchers use statistical and mathematical models and examine Swedish twins born between 1900 and 1935, a time marked by world wars, the Great Depression, the Spanish flu pandemic. They then compared those findings with Danish twins born between 1870 and 1900, when infectious diseases like cholera killed many at young ages. They focused on cancer, cardiovascular disease, and dementia. Cancer showed the weakest genetic link, while dementia showed the strongest. According to their findings, genes explain more than 50% of the differences in lifespan, far higher than the 25% or less suggested earlier. Previous studies, they claim, skewed the results by including early deaths unrelated to genetics. Still, lifespan matters. Researchers estimating healthy or unhealthy habits can add or subtract about 5 years. Diet, exercise, weight control, not smoking will not change your genetic limit, but they can decide how well and how long within that limit you live. Mexico has made some of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the last decade. A 1,400-year-old tomb has been discovered by the archaeologists, a sculpture of an owl adorning the entrance, whereas several murals are seen in the burial chamber. A look now at some of the most stunning visuals of the ancient tomb. Our planet is warming, the polar ice cap is melting. We've heard about this, of course. Scientists predicted that with melting ice, the polar bears would have a tough time. But surprisingly, they seem to be having a feast. The polar bears in the Arctic are becoming fatter, and now scientists are trying to understand why they are bulking up, even as the Arctic ice vanishes, defying climate doom predictions.
The Arctic is changing, fast and unforgiving. Where once we expected decline, scientists are seeing an astonishing twist. Some polar bears are bulking up even as their icy hunting grounds vanish. In the remote Norwegian Arctic of Svalbard, something remarkable is happening. Polar bears, icons of a melting world, are getting fatter even while sea ice retreats at record speed. Researchers tracking 770 adults from 1992 to 2019 found body fat reserves rising, not falling. It's stark science. Sea ice in the Barents. Sea around Svalbard has lost roughly 100 ice-covered days over that period, forcing bears onto land more often. Yet, instead of starving, many bears are gaining weight. Experts say the secret to the polar bear's success lies in a lethal mix of opportunism and accidental advantage. As sea ice fragments, ringed seals, who are the bear's primary target, are being forced into smaller, denser patches of ice. This creates a high-calorie buffet for the bears, making their hunting more efficient than ever before. According to the findings published in Nature Journal, scientists say that polar bears could have also adapted to recent ice loss by eating more land-based prey, including reindeer and walruses. However, scientists caution that fat polar bears isn't a thing to rejoice. This resilience is behavioral, not genetic adaptation. As the ice continues to vanish, there will be a breaking point where the energy spent traveling to find food far outweighs the calories consumed.
If you are someone who comes alive after sunset, working late, scrolling into the nighttime hours, then your heart may be paying the price. A new study published in the Journal of the American Heart Association suggesting that adults who identify as night owls tend to have poorer heart health and face a higher risk of serious events like heart attacks or strokes. The research focuses on chronotype, a person's natural tendency to be active in the morning or late in the evening, and how that daily rhythm connects to long-term cardiovascular health. Researchers analyzed nearly 14 years of data from the UK Biobank, tracking over 300,000 adults with an average age of 57. Participants were asked how they viewed themselves, about 8% saying they were definitely evening people staying up very late. 24% identified as definite morning people, preferring early nights and early mornings. The largest group, 67%, fell somewhere in between or were not sure. And to measure heart health, scientists used the American Heart Association's Life's Essential 8 score, which looks at everyday factors like physical activity, diet, sleep patterns, smoking or nicotine use, body weight, blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar. They also tracked who went on to experience a heart attack or stroke during the follow-up period. What were the results? Compared to the intermediate group, night owls had a 79% higher risk of poor cardiovascular health, a 16% higher risk of heart attack or stroke. Morning-oriented people, meanwhile, showed slightly better heart health overall. Notably, the link between late schedules and poorer heart health was stronger in women than in men. Researchers suggest that the internal body clock of so-called night owls often does not match with the natural daylight or typical work schedules, and that mismatch, they say, encourages habits like irregular sleep, poorer diets, or smoking, all of which strain the heart. The findings could help the doctors personalize lifestyle and medical advice to prevent heart disease. And it's important to note that the study has limits. It shows association, not cause for heart problems, and also relies on people self-reporting their habits, which could introduce bias. So in short, how you live your day and your night may matter more to your heart and your health than you believe. The Royal Mint has launched a nationwide code-breaking treasure hunt, hiding cryptic clues on everyday coins and offering a solid gold bar to anyone who cracks all 5 puzzles. The challenge starts in your wallet but then ends in high-stakes glory. Think you've got the brains to beat Britain? Take a look. A deep silence has fallen over fields and forests across the planet, and scientists are saying it's no good news. Insects, the tiny engines of our planet's ecosystems, are mysteriously falling silent, and that silence is being heard as a stark warning for humanity's future.
For decades, the buzz of insects was a constant, but across the globe, the biological engine of the earth is seizing up. The buzzing, chirping and humming that once filled summer skies is fading. Beetles, butterflies, bees, moths and other critters are vanishing at alarming rates around the world. Scientists say this silence is not normal. It's a red flag. What we are witnessing may signal systematic ecological strain that could ripple all the way to human survival. Insects aren't just background noise. They are foundational to life on Earth. More than 70% of our crops from apples to almonds rely at least in part on insect pollination. They are the first link in most terrestrial and freshwater food chains, feeding birds, reptiles, fish and mammals. Without them, those chains fray and the entire ecosystems teeter. A long-term study tracking flying insect biomass in protected areas found populations had fallen by more than 75% by 2016. Projections suggest that by 2030, as many as a quarter of all insect species could be lost. Scientists are not certain exactly why this is happening everywhere, but habitat loss, pesticides, climate change, and light pollution are all implicated. The alarm is not just about bugs. It's about the collapse of underlying natural processes that sustain food, biodiversity, and climate stability. The silence of insects could be the first sign of deeper ecological strain, one that ultimately affects human health, food security, and global economies. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas tonight. This is me, Molly Kampir, signing off. We're leaving you with Gravitas Worldview. Thanks very much for watching.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS Centenary Year, Kesariya at 100.
What does the budget really mean for you?
From taxes to growth and jobs to inflation.
Your money, your business, your future. Join us as we decode with expert analysis.
And the ground impact. No jargon, no noise, only clear answers.
Watch India Budget 2026 on WION World is One.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in